Is there a difference between paying fair market value and paying too much? Hey, this is Martin Taggart, Team Real Estate. I've got with me Suzie Taggart. So the question of the day is, I'll start off with the process. The process is the seller says, I'm offering to the market to sell my home for $350,000. That seller would have had the advice of a professional because it's on the MLS. So the presumption is that that person shared with the seller what trends looked like.
Right.
In the multi-offer situation we're in, they got more than one offer on the home. So what's the difference between fair market value, which is oftentimes greater than the listing value, and paying too much?
Well, I think for somebody who's buying a home, the paying too much can only be defined by them. A home is worth what a buyer is willing to pay for it. So if a home is listed for $350,000 and they're looking at all of the homes in that price range, and they are willing to pay $370,000 or $380,000 for a particular home listed at $350,000 because they can't find another home between $350,000 and $380,000 that fits what they need, then that home to the buyer is worth that $380,000 price point. Now, if they're getting a loan, the lender is going to order an appraisal, and that appraiser may come back and say, I know you think it's worth $380,000, but it's not. We think it's only worth $360,000. Well, the definition of worth is different. There's the definition of worth to the buyer and the definition of worth to the appraiser. So you have different situations with regards to paying too much. The appraiser doesn't want a buyer to pay more than the market can support for the statistics of that home. But the buyer may still be willing to pay that extra because of the choices that they have available to them. So if you really, really, really want a vanilla latte at the coffee shop and you can't get a vanilla latte because they're out of vanilla, you might take a caramel latte. So they're having to pick and choose, but are they willing to pay the same price for the caramel latte? I don't know. Depends on if you like caramel or not.
So the best example I've given of an appraiser's job is that they're trying to drive the car forward while looking in the rearview mirror because they're seeing statistics based on pre-trend. That's a nerdy way of saying they're looking at the sales dollars. So in this case, if the other homes in the neighborhood had sold for $325,000 and $337,000 and $345,000 and $347,000, progressively moving upward, then there's a trend that's upward. So in this case, our hypothetical seller decided with a realtor to list the home at $350,000. The difficult part that the appraiser then is faced with is that the offer came in this situation at $370,000. So can the appraiser justify all $370,000 worth of upward trend, or can they support only a portion of it? So that's the difficulty that the appraiser faces. So what happens then when the home appraises, like in this example, it appraised for $360,000, but we had an agreed upon sales price of $370,000, which presumably the buyer's lender could support. So they could afford $370,000. So then what happens with the difference between $360,000 and $370,000?
Well, it depends on the agreement made up front in the contract on what's going to happen with that difference. So there are a lot of buyers right now with a lot of cash, and they really need to get into that next home because of their life changes, and they're willing to pay the difference if their lender will allow it. That's the thing, not every lender will allow. So if there's a $10,000 gap between the contract price and the appraised value, then the expectation for how to handle that should have been discussed up front at the time of the contract. Sometimes it's not, but most of the time it is.
So we have four options though, right? Because you could say, yes, I'm paying all of it.
Yep.
I've got a bag full of money in the back of my car, paying all. You could say, no, I'm only paying what the appraiser states. What else can you do?
You can pay for part of that gap. So we have a lot of my buyers are willing to pay $2,000 of any of that gap because for them to cancel a contract and start over, they're going to have to pay for all of their inspections again, and they're going to have to go out and look at houses again, and it's definitely worth anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 for most of my buyers to not have to start over. And then they can also just say, no thank you, and we can respectfully cancel the contract and they can try to sell it for the same price later.
My goodness. So a lot of realtors on the listing side don't understand that depending upon the type of appraisal that's done based on the loan that's being secured by that initial buyer, that appraisal may sit with that property for 6 to 12 months depending upon, again, the type of loan that it's got.
Okay.
So the listing agent would have to have a conversation with the seller in advance that would say, guess what, Kevin, if you're not going to sell it at this price, you have to just understand that that information is going to be available for the next few people who try to write an offer at that approved value, no greater. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Good to be here.